Once upon a time, there was a small village called Ikoko. In this village, their only source of water was the rain during the raining season. Whenever it rained, the villagers danced with joy, knowing that their water pots would be full again. They stored as much water as they could, but no matter how much water they stored, the water was never enough to last through the long dry season. When there was no water left, they would go to the neighboring villages and beg for water. Sometimes they were allowed to fetch from their streams, other times they were turned away. One night, while the people of Ikoko were fast asleep, heavy rain began to pour down, beating loudly on rooftops and waking everyone from their deep sleep. It was still the dry season, and rain was not supposed to fall during this time. The villagers were confused but also amazed because such a thing had never happened before in their lifetime. Curious and excited, they stepped out of their huts, one by one, holding up their hands to feel the rain on their skin. They had a taste of the water, and to their surprise, it tasted so sweet. This was strange, yet exciting. They had never heard of a sweet rain before. It seemed like a divine miracle, so they took it to mean that the gods had blessed them. For a moment, they forgot all their worries and danced in the rain, giving thanks and praises to the gods. Then, fearing that the sweet rain might never come again, the villagers quickly filled all their empty pots. But to their greatest surprise, the sugar rain fell again the following night. It fell the next night and the next. In fact, it fell every night, only in Ikoko. The villagers called it the sugar rain. People from different villages, both nearby and far away, began to travel to Ikoko with their clay pots. Since the sugar rain only fell at night, they had to sleep over in Ikoko, waiting patiently for the magical rain to pour down. The next morning, they would return to their villages with their pots full of the sweet water, sharing stories of the miracle that had happened in Ikoko. As more and more people visited Ikoko, the once quiet and unknown village became popular. People no longer called it simply Ikoko. Instead, they called it Ikoko, the land of sweet water. One bright morning, the chief of Ikoko gathered a few respected elders to hold a meeting. At this meeting, they talked about how the sugar rain had brought many people and attention to their village. They believed this was their chance to gather a lot of cowries. Their plan was to use the cowries to develop Ikoko to become more beautiful. They believed that by collecting money from visitors who came to fetch the sugar rain, they could build a better village. So, they agreed that anyone who was not from Ikoko would now have to pay before fetching the rain. At first, the payment was small, just a little token that anyone could afford. Visitors still came, willing to give a few cowries, but as time passed, the cost began to rise. What started as a small fee became something heavier, something not everyone could pay. Only wealthy men and women could afford the sugar rain. One hot afternoon, an old woman arrived at the boundary of Ikoko village. Her name was Nkema Kolam. She had come from a faraway village. She didn't come with a water pot. She had only come to have a taste of the sugar rain. Nkema Kolam was a priestess. She had been a priestess since her youth because of her deep love for sacred things. She had spent her whole life serving the gods, and helping those in need. For weeks, she had been battling an illness that no herbs could cure. She had prepared herself for death, believing her journey on earth was coming to an end. But when the news of the sweet rain in Ikoko reached her ears, she was fascinated by such a divine miracle. She had never heard of a rain falling during the dry season, and never in her many years had she known water to taste like sugar. And so, despite her weak state, she decided to journey to Ikoko to witness the miracle and have a taste of the rain. But unfortunately, she was stopped at the boundary by one of the men guarding the boundary. He looked at her with harsh eyes and asked her for money. But Nkema Kolam, with pleading eyes, said she had no money on her. She added that she had only come to have a taste of the sweet rain. But the man told her harshly that she would not be allowed to have a taste of the rain without paying first. Nkema Kolam walked away and wept. With the little strength in her, she began the long journey back to the distant land she had come from. That same day at night, the once sweet rain tasted bitter, so bitter that they spat it out. There was nothing that tasted so bitter like the rain. The news of the bitter rain spread quickly throughout different villages. People stopped coming to Ikoko. The people of Ikoko were filled with worry. They felt that the bitter rain was a punishment from the gods, but they had no idea what they had done to offend the gods. The elders of Ikoko sent for priests and priestesses from far and near. These spiritual men and women came, performed rituals, chanted prayers, and offered sacrifices, but the rain remained bitter. Soon, the plenty cowries that had once filled their baskets and calabashes were gone because they had to pay the spiritualists for their services. The elders of Ikoko were desperate to know what they had done to offend the gods. So they began to beg for help. They went from shrine to shrine, pleading for free spiritual services. But most of the spiritual men and women they met refused to help without payment. Only a few spiritualists, who were touched by the suffering of the villagers, agreed to help without asking for anything in return. Among those few was Nkema Kolam. Nkema Kolam stood before the elders and told them how she had traveled a long journey just to taste the sugar rain, only to be turned down. She said her heart had broken that day, and in her pain, she had placed a curse on the village. But seeing how they desperately needed help, Nkema Kolam no longer carried bitterness in her heart. Instead, she felt sorry for the people who had once been so joyful. She told them that she had forgiven them. She said that the gods had listened to her pain and that now they would listen to her forgiveness. She promised that the curse would be lifted and the sweet rain would return to Ikoko. When she finished, she left. The people of Ikoko had a mixture of hope and doubt as they anxiously waited for nighttime when the rain would fall. They prayed and hoped that the sugar rain will return just as Nkema Kolam had said. At night, the rain fell, and to their greatest joy, it was sweet again. They danced in the rain and sang praises to the gods for showing them mercy. From that night onward, no one was ever asked to pay again to fetch the sugar rain. Whether rich or poor, old or young, everyone was welcomed with warm hearts and open hands. The sugar rain was a blessing, and it was not meant to be sold, but shared.